Welcome to the Huntington Way Show, where we help parents navigate the educational maze. I'm your host, Yvonne Strachan, author and founder of InspirationalHomeschooling.com. I am speaking with Craig Harrison. He is an engineer, homeschool dad, and author of Your Child's Best Teacher. We are going to talk about home education from a father's perspective today. And he has some great insight on this. He's been homeschooling his kids for a decade now. And before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors, the Huntington Learning Center and Inspirational Homeschooling, for bringing this show to you. You're listening on Power Talk 1040 AM, 98.5 FM, and 95.7 FM. Please like and subscribe to Power Talk 1040 on YouTube. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Thank you, Yvonne. It's nice to be here.
It's great to have you back. So today I want to focus more on the father's perspective in home education. So tell me, what are some unique challenges that you face as a dad who is teaching your children at home?
A lot of the challenges are the same, but there are some things which are quite different for a dad being in this role. And the first thing that I want to clarify is that generally in homeschooling circles, when people talk about a homeschool dad, they're talking about the husband of the wife who's teaching their children and how the dad can support his wife and maybe help with science and mathematics, because men tend to gravitate towards that, and take them on field trips and things like that. So to clarify, when I talk about a homeschool dad, I'm talking about a father who is not working and is raising his children and is teaching them full time. I know one of the great things about home education is that we can have flexibility, and sometimes the husband and wife share that responsibility. But to me, there's a huge difference between being involved in something and being responsible for it. And so a homeschool dad is responsible for his children. That's his role. And I've told myself time and time over the years, my children are the responsibility that God has given to me. They're the ones that I need to focus on. So anything else that I might want to do, including writing a book, which took a lot of time over the last couple of years, but that was a distraction from my main role of raising and teaching my two boys. Along with that, I also want to say that there might be a lot of mothers that face some of the challenges that I have faced. I can't speak for women because I'm a man, but for a generation or more, women have been told that to really be fulfilled, they need to have a career. And family is a distraction, but if they want to be fulfilled as a person, they should develop a career. A lot of women have relinquished those career aspirations in order to raise their children. And that's a wonderful thing to do. But I think a lot of mums probably feel as well, some of the things that I felt, that they're missing out on something because they're focusing on their children, they're raising them and teaching them rather than working. So the first big challenge for me was, as a Christian, I always knew that my responsibility as a father was to provide for my family. 1 Timothy 5:8 says that if you do not provide for your family, then you're worse than an unbeliever. And this was something that I didn't know how to deal with for most of the time that I've been teaching my children. What I came to realize when I looked very closely at that verse is that, first of all, as a Westerner, I tend to think of providing as providing money. But provision is much more than just providing financially. And that verse isn't referring to providing finances or food on the table. It's in it isn't directed at fathers either. It's directed at parents. So because of the way English works, we say he, but in the Greek, it isn't gender specific. It's to both of the parents. So parents are to provide for their family, And in the context of that verse, it's also talking about providing for elderly parents more than for children. So that understanding, getting to realize what that verse meant, that had been like a weight over me for so many years. In some ways, that didn't help. It kind of clarified the spiritual thing. And okay, I know that I'm not being condemned because I'm in this role, but as a man, I still feel like that's my role. That's what men do. And a lot of that is exacerbated as well when I'm talking to other people. And what is the first question that people ask when they meet you?
Oh,
So,
they say, well, what do you do?
what
Right?
do you do?
Yeah.
Yep. Where do you work? I had somebody, I was talking to them, and he said to me, well, obviously you work. Where do you work? And every time I hear that, I'm thinking, no, I don't. But the truth is, so it's very hard to overcome that because that's my natural tendency. But here's the truth of the matter, and I want to speak directly to any dads that are taking on that role and are teaching. Also to any mothers that are feeling this way about perhaps that they're missing out on their true purpose by focusing on their family and on their children. And I know that there are homeschool dads out there. I wasn't able to get figures, but there are lots of dads out there. So understand that you are doing something far more important than a career. By focusing on your family, you're doing something far more important than simply providing income for a family. At the end of the day, what we want is for our children to know God and to have a strong family bond. And what they learn academically is nice, that's a bonus, but that's not the most important thing. And if your situation is that as a dad, you need to be the one raising your children, you need to be the one teaching your children, that is the role that God has given you. God values family, and He wants you in that role to keep your family together. And what you are sacrificing is far more than the hours that other dads are putting into their career to bring in income and to put food on the table. You're providing security for your family, and you are protecting your children in a world that is bent on taking them away from the Christian faith and taking them away from the family. So that is a sacrifice that you are making, and it is well worth it.
Oh, absolutely. The way our society is today, we're focused more on humanism instead of our faith in God. And we don't always think about relating to the Bible, which is the guide and the perfect guide for raising and educating children and for every matter you have in life. And I think we have gone so far away from that. And when parents have lost their influence on their children, it's very hard to get that back because we're literally farming that out to everybody else who has different ideologies. And so I love that. And I love this point that you had made in your book. I'm just going to read it because I just love it. You say, in generations past, the father would naturally be a mentor by teaching practical skills on the farm or in a trade. But today, many children never see their father at work. Now, that is impactful. Since the Industrial Revolution moved occupation out of the home, fathers have had less chance to spend time with their children and pass on their wisdom, their knowledge, their skills, and faith, right? Yeah. So we just
Yeah.
have about a minute left if you want to make a comment on that, and then we'll come back and speak more to these points.
Yes, there's a wonderful thing about a family working together in a trade on a farm. That's not the reality for most people these days. And while the idea of going back to a homestead is a very good one, there's also the fact that we live in the world that we're in today, and we need to adapt to that. And children seeing how you act as a father. The fatherhood is so important. It has been under attack for a generation. And so having fathers involved in their education and even taking the leading role in it is something which is very valuable for the children growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about father's role in education. Stay tuned. We'll see you in a minute. Welcome back to the Huntington Way Show. You are listening on Power Talk 1040 AM, 98.5 FM, and 95.7 FM. Please like and subscribe to Power Talk 1040 on YouTube. I'm your host, Yvonne Strachan, and I am here with Craig Harrison. He is a homeschool dad, and he's giving us a great perspective on home education. Now, Craig, you had talked about being a father, a dad, and educating your kids, but really, it's a team effort, right? It's about the family. And I love that you talk about the family as a team and relate this to biblical wisdom on discipleship and mentorship within the home by both parents. And so, can you speak to that?
Yes, and I think family is the area that I felt more drawn towards as I have been thinking about what I wrote in the book, as I've been speaking about it. What I've come to realize is that home education is not so much about education, it's about family. I think the family aspect of it is so important. And I do want to say as well, we all know that we live in a fallen world, that we're not going to achieve perfection in any area until Jesus returns. And sometimes it can be difficult to talk about the topic of families when we know that there are people in families who are struggling in different situations, who don't fit in with the perfect stereotype. What I found helpful is that Jordan Peterson talks about having an ideal, but having a range of tolerance around that ideal. So we can still talk about the ideal while recognizing that none of us are going to meet the ideal of a perfect family if we're talking about a family. So I want to think about what God sees as the importance of family and how he intended it to be before the fall, but recognize as well that we are in a fallen world, that people are in different situations, and we can still strive as much as we can towards that ideal without condemning those that don't meet that definition. But when I look at education, when I look at the Bible as well, we see that God loves the family, and he created that as the institution through which education and community and society should be based. It was the Greek worldview that disrupted that thought and took education out of the home and put it in the institution. So the key for me is that home education puts education back into the family. And into the family, it doesn't just move it from school and then the mum takes control and does the teaching. It puts it into the family unit where the parents should be involved in mentoring and discipling their children together.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And you refer in your book to many Bible verses that talk about home discipleship and mentoring, and how the Bible doesn't always necessarily say, okay, this is, how you teach or how you do things, but it talks a lot about parenting and discipleship and, guiding your children. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, that's something that I had to think about when I was writing the book. What do I mean by education? Because I think most people these days think about education as academic learning. It's learning things, it's learning stuff. And again, that goes back to the Enlightenment, when reason was elevated above virtue. The classical model of education had learning within the context of virtue. But if we go back beyond that, and I heard Kevin Swanson talk about reforming education, we don't need to reform education. A lot of people are thinking about the worldview that underlines education, but we need to transform education by putting it back within the family, because education, if we look at the 1828 Webster's Dictionary, we see a very different definition to the 2010 Oxford English Dictionary. And
Yes.
I define education as the raising of a child and instruction in religious, moral, social, and intellectual matters. So intellectual is only part of it. We know in Proverbs that we're to seek wisdom above all else. Wisdom is not academic learning. It isn't knowing things. It's knowing things within a moral framework. And we can't create that moral framework in a school because the teachers don't have that position of authority over their children. That's the parents' responsibility to teach their children a moral framework. So if learning is done outside of that moral framework, then children will not develop wisdom. And if we want to look at the world around us and decide whether over the last half a century the learning has resulted in a lot more wisdom, well, I don't know if you'll come to a different conclusion to me, but teaching children within that context is really important. But then going a step further is to think about our faith and imparting our faith. And at the end of the day, as a parent, my greatest prayer is that my children follow Jesus, commit to him, that they walk closely with him, regardless of what they learn in during their education. And being able to impart that faith is something that as parents we need to do within the context of the family. We can't expect youth group to do it or the church to do it or other people to do it. That's our responsibility.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So as you're talking about this, I mean, I look at myself and I look at all the other moms and dads out there, and we love our children so much. We want what's best for them. And I don't know, for me, I look inward and I go, oh boy, I failed at this, or I feel guilty about this or whatever. And I know in your book, you actually say something toward that too, and you're trying to help others because of this. And you feel that you had a great failure as a teacher and that you would like that to become someone else's greatest triumph. What is that?
Yeah, that's just recognizing that that loving your children and making them feel positive about the learning experience is so important. As an engineer, I find it hard to empathize with people that don't understand the things that I understand. And when you're talking about a 7 or 8-year-old and you're expecting them to understand what I knew after 20 years as an engineer, that's asking quite a bit. But I think the root of it is that as a father, I was feeling like a failure for not providing for my family. And so it was my own struggle that was being reflected in the way that I taught. There was a point, now understand engineers like to try things out. And so I decided, okay, I'll do an experiment one day. So I decided to be happy for a week and see how my children behaved. And they behaved fairly well. And I've got 2 boys. If you know boys, they fight. That's just what they do. But during that week when I was happy, they were pretty good. And then I went back to being grumpy. to being upset about my own weaknesses and failings, and their behavior was just markedly worse. And it was so clear to me that the way I act as a parent is reflected in the way that my children act. And if we just love them, then they will respond so much better, regardless of how much we know about, regardless of what our own level of academic learning is or how competent we feel about teaching a subject. Loving them and making them feel part of a loving family, to know that they are supported and that they belong in the family, is going to provide the environment in which they can really grow and flourish.
Yeah, I think that's such a tremendous point, a tremendous takeaway for all of us homeschool parents, that, we are the best teachers for our children. Our attitudes are contagious, right? And so if we have a good attitude, we hold them up, we celebrate their successes, we encourage them, and we just have a good attitude and just want to help them, we're going to succeed and they're going to succeed. So the biggest question is, why are parents the best teachers for our children? Well, you answer that here in this book. And you say it's not because we are an expert in our children, right? It's because we love our children, we care for them, and we will do what's best for them. This book is amazing, guys. If you would pick it up, it's Your Child's Best Teacher by Craig Harrison, and you can get it on Amazon. Where else can you get it, Craig?
It's also available at Barnes & Noble and thrift books.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Yvonne Strachan, today's host on the Huntington Way Show, where we support you in educating your kids.